In practice, the judicial death penalty has rarely been carried out in Guatemala, but capital punishment is a legal penalty in Guatemala, and is carried out by lethal injection and, to a lesser extent, the firing squad. It is only in military codes of justice, and was abolished for civilian offenses in October 2017. From 2005 to 2012, the sentences of all 54 inmates condemned to death were commuted to life in prison. There are currently no inmates on death row in Guatemala. Guatemala voted in favor of the UN moratorium on the death penalty in 2007, 2010, 2012, 2014, and 2016. The country abstained from voting in 2008. In Guatemala, the death penalty is applicable to both common crimes and military offenses. In the case of the former, the existing criminal code provides for the death penalty in the case of the following crimes: abduction or kidnapping, murder, forced disappearances, extrajudicial executions, parricide, cases resulting in the deaths of either the president or vice president, and violations of Article 52 of the Drug Trafficking Act, Decree 48-92, which states that if as a result of the offenses under this law one or more persons should die, the death penalty will be applied. For its part, Decree 100-96 law establishing the procedure for the execution of the death penalty regulates lethal injection as a method of execution of persons convicted of criminal offenses. In the case of the military code, Decree number 214 of 1878 provides for the death penalty for such crimes as treason, espionage, rebellion and sedition, as well as allowing the option of applying capital punishment to other, unspecified crimes. Executions for military offenses are carried out by firing squads. In the context of the military, it is unknown whether capital punishment has been applied in the case of such offenses. In 2017, the Supreme Court of Justice of Guatemala banned capital punishment for civil crimes. Currently, it can only be applied in times of war. Guatemala is one of 7 countries that has abolished capital punishment for ordinary crimes only. 5 executions had been carried out since 1983. All were broadcast live on television. The last executions took place on June 29, 2000, when kidnappers and murderers Amilcar Cetino Perez and Tomas Cerrate Hernandez were executed by lethal injection on live television. On June 30, 2000, Luis Amilcar Cetino Perez and Tomas Cerrate Hernandez were 2 Guatemalan men convicted of murder. Their execution was televised on Guatemalan television. Amilcar Cetino Perez and Tomas Cerrate were members of a notorious gang, who are believed to commit numerous crimes in Guatemala. The Pacifico gang 2 years before the rise of Augusto Negro, a criminal gang known as Los Pacifico appeared. Its name comes from Pacifico, Chiapas, where some of its members were from. Kidnappings, murders, torture and the massive escape of prisoners from high-security prisons mark a violent era, dominated by the bloodiest criminal gangs that have operated in Guatemala. From the 1990s to the first decade of the 2000s, the country was stalked by criminal groups that kidnapped, demanded million-dollar ransoms, and murdered the victims. Amongst their numerous crimes, the Pacificos requested $3 million to free the woman. 3 months after the abduction, there was a strong operation in a shopping center where a kidnapper was captured, who revealed the location of Bonifaci, in Villanueva. The police officers found the body of the woman in the building with signs of malnutrition and strangulation and marks that pointed to the fact that her hands and feet were tied all the time. This gang was also linked to Rigorico. He became known in Guatemala and the world for the kidnapping and death of Isabel Bonifaci de Beltran. The gang is also believed to have issued death threats against the family of President Alfonso Portillo, prompting Mr. Portillo to send his mother, sister, brother-in-law and 2 nephews to Canada to protect them from possible retaliation. The 2 perpetrators were members of a well-known kidnapping gang. Members of the dead woman's family also left Guatemala for the United States. Los Pasico gang began with 15 or so members robbing cars, convenience stores and banks in 1994. It has grown into a well-organized criminal syndicate 100 strong that specializes in high-profile kidnappings. On the day of their execution, on June 30, 2000, Tomas Cerrate was strapped down and at 6 in the morning, drugs flowed into his arm from a wall-mounted bag. Over 11 minutes, as he died, the program showed the line of a heart monitor start to flatten. Then it cut back to Cetino's hand as it quivered, then lay still. The executions, which were rebroadcast continually for hours, caused such a stir here that the Guatemala City newspaper Nuestro Diario said it will publish 220,000 copies, a Guatemalan record. The second execution began at 7:15 in the morning. Cerrate was shown being led, shaking, to the death chamber and prison doctors said he had had a complete nervous breakdown. The executions took place after weeks of often wild speculation about possible jailbreaks allegedly planned by the kidnap gang to rescue their condemned associates. The men were the second and third Guatemalans to be executed by lethal injection. The 52 other Guatemalan executions in the last 100 years were by firing squad, the last of which was televised live in September 1996. On the day of the executions of Amilcar Cetino Perez and Tomas Cerrate, viewers making breakfast watched on as Amilcar Cetino Perez, 35, said his last words, which appeared to be a prayer. Amilcar Cetino and Tomas Cerrate Hernandez were sentenced to death for their part in the kidnapping in January 1997 of Bonifacio de Bertran, 80, an heir to the Bertran liquor distillery fortune, who was found dead after her family paid the ransom. The 2 men died proclaiming their innocence. Both executions took some minutes. Amnesty International has said that the executions were botched and the prisoners suffered prolonged suffering. The macabre spectacle was replayed on Guatemalan TV throughout the day. Cetino Perez's mother, Teresa Canagdi Santillo, fainted outside the prison when she learned of her son's execution, and was treated by paramedics for shock. Cetino Perez also had a wife and 4 children. Not much was known about the other inmate executed, Tomas Cerrate Hernandez. Thank you for watching Death Row.